Y'all know what's going on. It's time for another episode of Doing Time with Joe. I'm your host, Joe Baker. Welcome to episode 2 of Pententiary Kingpin. The next morning, St. John was awakened by the sound of the officer's radio. Code 1, Code 1. Officer needs assistance. All available staff report to Building 9. This is Building 9, thought St. John. He leaned over to see if Rome was awake. He was still knocked out. St. John quietly jumped down from his bunk so he could see what was going on. When he got to the window of the cell, he saw officers and nurses inside the cell directly across from his. The inmate was stretched out on the floor. The nurses looked like they were performing CPR on him. He stood there for a few minutes before he decided to get back in the bunk. When he turned around to go back to the bunk, Rome raised up and said, "What's going on out there?" St. John told him that the nurses looked like they were performing CPR on the inmate in the cell across from them. Rome thought for a minute and said, "Oh, that's P. Willie. He probably OD'd again." "OD'd on what?" said St. John. Rome looked at him and said, "I don't know. Probably cocaine or heroin." St. John had never tried any hard drugs and had no intentions of doing so now. But he was curious about how things worked inside of prison, as far as getting money, getting drugs in. He had heard stories from the guys at the county jail that had been to prison, but he had never tried anything like that himself. Rome saw the concern in his eyes, so he said, "There's a lot of money to be made in here if you can keep the drugs coming." "How do you get it in?" St. John asked. Rome gave him that look of concern, trying to decide if he could trust him or not. "Do you want to know just to be nosy, or are you trying to get money?" St. John, without thinking, said, "I would like to get money." Rome raised up from his bunk and looked him straight in the eyes and said, "You sound like a police." "I'm not the police," St. John said. He knew that he had to be careful because the last thing you want to be accused of being in prison is of being a police. Rome didn't really believe St. John was the police. He just wanted to see how pissed off St. John would get for being called the police. St. John remembered a story he was told by someone at the county jail that had been to prison before. He told him, if someone calls you the police, you should immediately hit them in the mouth. So St. John positioned himself just right. He knew he would only get one chance, one punch, so it better be a good one. As soon as Rome tried to stand up, he swung as hard as he could. Rome saw the punch coming, so out of his peripheral, he tried to duck, but he was too slow. The punch landed right on his jaw. When he hit the ground, he knew he was in trouble. He didn't want to fight. He was just testing him. "Stop, stop," yelled Rome. St. John, standing over him, said, "Don't you ever call me the police again." Rome, on his knees, mouth bleeding, raised his right arm above his head. "You got that, Saint. My bad. It won't happen again." St. John extended his arm to help Rome to his feet. It was in that moment that Rome decided that St. John could be trusted. His only problem was how to convince him to become his mule. Once the nurses got P. Willie out of the building and to the hospital, everyone was let off lockdown. Rome immediately went to tell Johnny what had happened. Even though Rome apologized, St. John's didn't believe it was over. His gut was still telling him to not trust Rome. Besides, the old heads at the county jail had told him too many stories of people who let their guards down and then ended up dead. In prison, peace is a rarity. Over the next few months, Word spread around the unit about what had happened between Rome and St. John. Even though it looked like he had earned some respect, he wasn't going to ignore his gut. Rome and Johnny still hadn't figured out how to approach St. John about muling. So they pondered and pondered to try to figure it out. They couldn't play him weak anymore. This young man would stand up for himself. St. John hadn't seen his parents since the county jail, so he was excited when he found out that the visitation forms had been approved. So he called his parents and told them that they can come visit him anytime on the weekend from 8 to 3. He was excited because they said they would be coming up this weekend. Rome thought to himself, this will be the perfect time to reel him in. Rome told his wife, Tiffany, to make sure to come to visit and bring their daughter, his stepdaughter, 21-year-old Roxanne. Tiffany had Roxanne before she met Rome. Rome was a cutthroat dude who would use anything and anybody to gain the advantage, even his stepdaughter. Roxanne was a beautiful girl, and Rome was betting she had a soft spot for people in prison, just like her mama, because Rome had plans for her in St. John. In prison, you can tell when it's visitation time. All the inmates are getting ready. The clothes are being ironed, fresh haircuts. Everybody's getting the oil to put on so they can smell good when they get up to the visitation. It's a real event going on, y'all. It's a real event. St. John, he really missed his parents, especially his mother. So he wanted to look his best so she wouldn't worry about him. He didn't want her to think that he was starving. He didn't want her to think that he was having a rough time of it. He wanted her to think everything was just fine. When he walked into the VG, he immediately saw his parents sitting in the closest corner to the exit. He had told them some of the stories that he had heard in prison, so they wanted to be close to the way out, just in case. When he got to them, they stood up and embraced as a family. His mother started crying and did not want to let him go. His father stood back to let her get it out of her system. He understood because of the bond they were having. They've always had a close bond. It wasn't unusual for a mother and a son to be as close as they were. He felt the same way, but he didn't want his son to believe that he was scared to death for him, because he was. He had no experience with prison. He had never been locked up in his life, so he couldn't really guide his son, give him any advice on what he should or shouldn't do. All he knew was to tell his son to protect himself. But his mother, that was another story. She worried constantly about if something would happen to him, what would she do? How would she live with herself? Because she blamed herself for him being in prison. She thought that she had made some mistakes in his life, not knowing that St. John had made his decisions on his own. Rome had come in a few minutes later behind St. John's. After about an hour, he walked his wife and stepdaughter over to meet St. John. It was a very respectful meeting. St. John's parents thanked Rome for being kind to their son. They had no idea that they had been fighting because St. John hadn't told them. When Rome introduced Roxanne to St. John, he was looking for any sign that they were attracted to each other. When they shook hands, Roxanne held on just for a second longer, sliding her hand away from his, looking him straight into the eye, giving him that sign that all you got to do is ask and I'm yours. Rome saw that. Gotcha, he said in his mind. How could any young man resist Roxanne, he thought. As they looked at each other, this was going to be easy. After the visit, Rome and St. John returned to the housing unit. St. John was on cloud 9. He was so happy to have seen his parents, he didn't know what to do. Plus, he was eager to talk to Rome about Roxanne. How was your visit, Saint? Man, it was straight. I love to see my parents, man. They were happy, satisfied. We ate good, all of those types of things, right? But I'm feeling good right now. But he said, look, man, I don't want to be disrespectful to you about anything, right? But what's up with Roxanne, man? Is she with anybody? Does she have a boyfriend? Inside Rome's mind, he was thinking, yeah, I got it. He's pushing. So he said, nah, she's single, man. She's going to school and all of that kind of stuff, right? Trying to do it the right way. So Rome said, why? Why you asking all these questions? St. John said, man, look, man, I would sure like to talk to her, man, if she didn't mind. He said, well, I'll find out, man. When we get back to the unit after they get home, I'll give her a call, man. If she wants to talk to you, I'll let you talk to her. She's grown. She knows her own business. She can handle herself. So when they get back to the unit after the lockdown, they come out. Rome gets on the phone. He calls the house. He's talking to his wife for a few minutes, gets Roxanne on the phone and tells Roxanne that St. John wants to talk to her and if she would mind talking to her. She said, yeah, I would love to talk to him. So they get on the phone. It was love at first phone call with them. They talked and they talked and they talked. She even gave St. John her private number, her own cell phone number, to put on the list so he could call her himself. She didn't want to have to go through her stepdad because she really didn't like him to be able to talk to St. John. So when they got all of that squared away every day, St. John's was on the phone. Rome was loving it. He was loving it, but he hadn't figured out how to convince him to bring that pack back. Because what he hadn't told St. John was that his wife was bringing the pack. And now that Roxanne and St. John's were talking, Rome figured that he would be able to get Roxanne to bring a pack up in there for St. John, and he would be able to benefit from it because the pipeline was his. The dope was his. That means more money for him. That was the plot. But he had to figure out how to get it back. He didn't bring his own product back, so he had to have a way to bring it back, and he wanted St. John to be that guy. But it had to be somebody special to bring that pack back because it involves a lot of things that a lot of men don't do. And that means putting something up in your body cavity. And this young man had never done anything like that in his life. So after a few months go by, Rome is he's ready to ask the question. So they're in the cell talking. And he asked him, he said, how's everything going with you and Roxanne? St. John said, man, great, man. He said, man, I can see myself with her for the rest of my life when I get out of here if she holds me down. He said, oh, she that tight, man. She just like her mama. She gonna hold you down. He said, but part of holding somebody down, it costs money. He was like, yeah, I know. My mom, she gonna make sure she give her money to put on the phone so she don't have to pay the phone bill. He said, no. He said, you thinking like a little boy. He said, it's time for you to start thinking like a man. You got a woman, you got to take care of that woman. He's pushing hard. St. John's ain't slow. He understands what's being said. He just don't understand how he's going to be able to do it. So St. John's leaning back. He said, man, what are you getting at? Come on out with it, man. I don't do those hinting around and stuff. He said, man, look, I'm going to just give you the blueprint. Anytime I go to visit, I bring something back to get some money. Because we got to pay bills out there. We got food to put in the refrigerator, gas to put in the car, mortgages to pay. And it don't stop because you come to the penitentiary. I've been doing this for a long time. So anytime Miss Tiffany come to see me, she bringing me something so I can get her some money. So when you want to go to visit and see Roxanne need to be bringing you something so you can get some money to take care of her. But there's one problem. You got to get it back from the VG to the unit. So St. John looked at him and said, well, how do I do that? How am I going to get it back? He said, look here, man. I got me a guy to take care of mine. He said, well, he can take care of it for me too, right? He was like, nah. He can't hold all that. He said, but you can hold your own. He said, I can hold my own. How can I hold my own? I just can't walk out of the VG with it. I can't just put it in my pocket. They strip searches. So Rome looked at it. He said, look here, man. He said, man, you got to put it in the safe. Put it in the safe. Quit talking around circles with me, man, and tell me what's really going on. Because St. John's had an idea of what he was saying, but he didn't think the dude was really going to come out with it and said it, but he did. He said, man, you got to put it up in your ass, man. That's what you got to do. St. John's leaned back. He said, man, look here, man. When you called me the police, you disrespected me. When you just said what you said to me, you just disrespected me again. So do we need to go toe-to-toe again? This time, Rome stood up. He said, listen to me, young blood. You caught me slipping last time. You'll never catch me slipping again. So don't get it twisted like you did something. And then that's when he pulled out the pocket knife and he showed it, because I stay strapped. And if you ever put your hands on me again, man, blood on my knife. Simple as that. You understand? Are we clear? So St. John's is staring at him, looking at him, sizing him up. He wants to try him, but he's not stupid. He understands that if he rushes him with that knife, it could be all over. So he says, sit down, man. Let's talk this out. Rome's not slow. He don't want to let him go. He's got him where he wants him. He said, look, nobody will ever know, not even Roxanne, that you're taking care of the business. So you don't have to be embarrassed about anything. St. John's was like, nah, I can't do that. I can't do that. I can't do that. So Rome, being the classic dude that he is when it comes to the game, he leaned back. He said, look, either you want to get some money or you don't. And if you don't want to get no money, you need to find a way to get it back. If you want to get some money, find a way to get it back. If you don't want to get no money, then do you, man. Do you. That night, St. John's lay on his bunk, staring up at the ceiling all night. He didn't realize that Rome was laying down on the bottom bunk, staring up at the bottom of the bunk, laughing, smiling to himself. He'll break. That's what Rome said. He'll break. He's going to do it. He's got a taste of this. He's got a woman that's high maintenance, and he don't want to lose her. And I'm going to make sure he loses her if he don't take care of this. St. John's on the top of him, thinking to himself, man, what am I going to do? I don't want to lose her, and I know something is up, but I don't know quite what it is yet. I'm going to talk to Roxanne about it. That's what he thought. So he arranged for a visit with his parents. Roxanne came up with Miss Tiffany to see Rome. Now everybody knows that they're a couple, so they went to the side and they talked it out. While they were talking, Miss Tiffany said, look, I don't even mess with Rome like that. But if you want me to do it, I'll do it. I'll bring it for you, not him. Tell me what you want me to do. He said, I want to do it, but I got to find a way to get it back. She said, how you going to get it back? What does that mean? He said, man, Rome telling me he want me to put it up in me to bring it back. She's like, no, why would you do that? Why not use the same person he's got? St. John's telling her he won't allow it. She said, find somebody else. We'll pay him. He said, I'll work on that. But until then, don't worry about it. I'm not going nowhere. That's what Miss Roxanne told him. I got you. I'm going to hold you down. So they embraced and kissed, and everybody saw it. And Rome is watching from a distance, sitting at the table with Miss Tiffany. He thinks that the deal has been sealed. He thinks that everything is going to be just fine. When Roxanne walks back to the table, he asks, is everything okay? She said, oh, yeah. Just working out some things, some details. He said, good. That's what I was hoping for. St. John's goes back to his parents. When he's talking to them, his mama said, is everything all right? He said, yeah, mama, everything's going to be just fine. Do you need anything? His pop said, no, I'm good. Just make sure you send Roxanne some money for the phone so I can talk to her. His pop said, don't worry about that. You call as much as you need to, but you can still call us every now and then. St. John's looked at him and laughed. He said, I will, Pops. He kissed his mom on the jaw, hugged his Pops, said, I'll see y'all next week. See you next week, son, his mom and his dad said. Rome and St. John's walking back to the unit. The discussion was intense. What Rome told him, you think you got locks? You think you can take care of this without me? He said, I know people like you. I've seen people like you 1,000 times. You either do it the way I tell you to do it, or you're not going to be with her. I'm telling you. I don't care what she told you. Now he's messing with St. John's head. He don't know what to think. Should he believe Roxanne or should he believe Rome? His gut's telling him to trust Roxanne, not Rome. So when they get back to the unit, they go into the room. St. John just gets up on the top bunk, doesn't even talk. He's just thinking. Rome said, what you got going on? Just trying to figure it out. He said, you'll figure it out. You'll figure it out. This concludes another episode of Pententiary Kingpin. This has been another episode of Doing Time with Joe. I'm your host, Joe Baker, and I say peace, y'all.